Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for SIECUS Online as we present Integrated Sex Education in Faith Communities. My name is Michelle Slaybaugh. I am the Director of Social Impact and Strategic Communications here for SIECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change, and I welcome you. We're so thrilled to have you here for this incredible event as a part of SIECUS's activations for May, which is Sex Ed for Month, right? Sex Ed for All Month. We are super excited to have you here tonight. And so before we get started, I'd love it if y'all could just drop into the comments where you are here from. I see Indianapolis is in the house, Baltimore is in the house. I see Ohio, San Francisco. Super excited to have all of you here this evening. And we are going to get started very shortly. And before we do, I'm going to kind of jump in to some of the housekeeping matters that we have on the table for this evening. So if you've never been to a SIECUS Online, we welcome you. We do these conversations from time to time where we invite experts in to talk about all the various ties and connections sex ed has to social justice work, because here we at SIECUS believe that sex education is an upstream advocacy approach to impacting and shifting real social change. So this event is streamed live, and we encourage participation from all of you tuning in today by dropping in your questions and your comments into the comment section. We will be identifying questions, and at the end of the presentation, there will be time that our lovely host will be addressing those questions. So please just kind of drop those in. Hey, Canada, we're international now. We love to see that. Boston's in the house, South Carolina, Detroit. We love to see so many of you who are here to explore how faith communities can advocate for quality and comprehensive sex ed that we believe all young people have the right to access. So in addition to wanting you to engage in conversation, we do want to remind you that this is a safe space. So if we see any language that may be deemed offensive, hurtful, harmful, or violent, we will remove you from the chat. We do have chat content moderators on now, keeping an eye out. So shout out to SIECUS's comms manager, Darian, on the back end, really helping us with production. Welcome to the spot, Philly. We're so glad that you are here. I'd also like to let you know that a copy of this recording will be available immediately on our YouTube channel. And for those of you who may have missed this or may have to leave halfway through, we'll also be emailing this out to all individuals who have registered for this event. Now, we are super excited because not only have we just kicked off Sex Ed for All Month, but SIECUS has actually just celebrated its 60th anniversary, April 29th, where we launched a brand new website. So be sure you go and check out www.siecus.org. And just so you know, we're going to be having incredible events throughout the year to celebrate this historic milestone of 60 years of service. SIECUS has been pounding the pavement and advocating for quality and the advancement of sex education. So we started and founded in 1964, and we have been a leading voice in shame-free education on human sexuality ever since, and a champion for sexual and reproductive freedom as an essential part of the human experience. We assert that sex education is a powerful vehicle for social change, and we are the only organization in the nation solely focused on advocating for the rights of all people to receive accurate information, comprehensive sex education, and a full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health services. You know, we think sex ed can spark social change. And in addition to this event tonight, we are kicking off our Sex Ed on the Hill annual convening. So some of our coalition members will be headed to the Hill virtually this week to meet with members of Congress and really try to push forward support on the Real Education and Access for Healthy Youth Act. And we want you to get involved. You can get involved by taking action and signing to send a letter to your member of Congress. And we'll be dropping that in the chat, the link for you to do that today. So without further ado, okay, let's get to what we came here for, right? Tonight's conversation is an enlightened journey through the dynamic world of comprehensive sex education within the faith-based communities. This is going to dive into how comprehensive sex education can significantly enhance the landscape across all school districts and the importance of faith-based communities really supporting that. We're going to be dispelling the myths of how and or why people think faith-based communities don't support sex education. So we have some really incredible speakers. And I'm going to pass it off to tonight's esteemed host, Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, is a strategic partnership director at the Political Research Associates, a research center focused on disrupting movements that undermine democracy and human rights. Previously, she served as the director of faith-based and interfaith affairs in the Philadelphia mayor's office and was the faith work director at the National LGBTQ Task Force. She is also a fabulous SIECUS board member. So at this time, I'm going to get off the camera and I'm going to let these esteemed individuals give us all the tea. So Reverend Naomi, many blessings to you. I am turning it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you, everybody, including the SIECUS colleagues who are behind the screen, behind the scenes, trying to make sure that we are smooth sailing technologically. So thank you so much. I'm Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart. I'm so delighted to be here in my capacity as a SIECUS board member. And I will say that I joined the board of SIECUS in part because I learned all the wrong lessons about sexuality and sex education in my faith community. And I wanted to be a part of an organization that was working to reverse those trends, to introduce comprehensive sexuality education as a values-based proposition, a values-based activity. And so I'm delighted to be here with Dr. Melanie Davis, who is the program manager for Our Whole Lives, OWL, at the Unitarian Universalist Association, and my good friend and colleague, Reverend Amy Johnson, who is the Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice at the United Church of Christ. I'm going to pause there because I want them to introduce themselves more fully. So why don't we start with you, Dr. Melanie, and then we'll go to Reverend Amy.
Sure. Thank you for the nice, warm welcome. I'm here from northern New Jersey, land of the Lenape Indians. I work within the Lifespan Faith Engagement Office, which is part of the Ministries and Faith Development Staff Group at the UUA. And in addition to sharing job duties with Amy, and we are, owl sisters in every sense of the word. I'm also part of the Unitarian Universalist Trauma Response Ministry. And I'm able to bring some of my sexuality expertise into that work as well.
Thanks, Dr. Melanie. Reverend Amy, go ahead.
Yes, I just thank you so much again for a warm welcome. I'd like to echo that, and I'm delighted to be here with you all. And I do serve as the UCC Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice, and work super closely with Melanie. And we are doing exciting things, which I think that you'll hear some more about tonight. It's a good time to be in this work and to be in this work as people of faith. So I'm delighted to be here tonight and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much to both of you for being here tonight. Let's just start right at the beginning. Can you tell us what is the Our Whole Lives curriculum? Tell us about the features of the curriculum. What do we need to know about OWL? And I don't know who wants to start. Just jump right on in.
Well, I'll dive in, and Amy, I'm sure will offer information as well. So Our Whole Lives is a comprehensive sexuality education that is developmentally appropriate for participants ranging from kindergarten through older age, whatever people determine for themselves as older age. But we have curricula for grades kindergarten through first, 4 through 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12, young adult, which we consider 18 to 35-ish, adult, and then older adult, which is, 50 and above. We have both secular content as well as faith content, but it's completely separate. So OWL can be used in any setting that follows along with the OWL values. I'm sure we're going to talk about what the OWL values are in deeper detail. Amy, what would you like to offer?
Yeah, I want to say that everything Melanie said, we have the faith components that do bring in our interfaith values. So the UUA has some material that brings in UUA principles, and the UCC has material that brings in scripture and prayer and litany and those kind of things. Sometimes people think that one or the other of our denominations sort of owns the program, and I think it's important to know that it's a partnership. And we have a formal memorandum of understanding between us, and we co-copyright our materials. So we are truly in a partnership around this ministry. We call it a ministry, really. And another thing is that I think one thing that's important to know about Our Whole Lives is that you can enter it at any stage. So the curricula do build on each other, but they aren't a prerequisite for each other. So wherever the sort of critical mass is in your community or your congregation or your organization, you can start there. You can start anywhere with it. It's never too early or too late to start talking about sexuality education and faith together.
Yeah. I think it's also one of the things that we share with SIECUS is a commitment to being accurate, and allowing people to have the information that they need to make their own decisions that are informed, so that we are not, neither of our faith traditions tells people you can't do this or you shouldn't do, other than consent. We are hardcore faithful to the concept of consent. But beyond that, at every stage of the game, even with kindergartners, we're teaching them about families and about babies and about relationships and safety in ways that help them make decisions about how to treat other people and how to treat themselves. And that same messaging goes across to people who are 80, that they have a right to make decisions about their sexuality and their relationships. So we can't do that without accurate information. So a large part of what Amy and I do is try to stay on top of that.
Yeah, and I want to say too that this idea that we don't tell people what to do. We don't. We have local church autonomy in both of our traditions. But I also think that it's important to begin to have conversations in faith communities around sex and sexuality. And one of my colleagues, Reverend Roberto Ochoa, does a lot of work with small and rural churches. And he talks about, let's talk about first do no harm. Mm-hmm. First do no harm. So what does that mean? And how can we be in conversation around making sure that when we are talking about these topics that we are not harming people, or we're not harming people by not talking about them? Because when we don't talk about these things, then we're saying basically it's not okay to talk about it. And we believe that it's really important to discuss sexuality in families and in schools and in churches, that it's a good thing to do, and that it's not something that is bad or wrong or shameful in any way.
I'm glad that Amy mentioned families, because one of the hallmarks of Our Whole Lives, the programs for folks who are under 18, is that the facilitators, the OWL facilitators, and the congregations or organizations that offer OWL programs are not the only people having these conversations, that we support families in having these conversations. And I think that's really important, because that fosters trust among the adults in children, youth, and teens' lives, if they know that their parents are willing to listen, willing to have conversations, willing to help children, youth, and teens have healthy relationships and decisions.
And, as I said about faith communities, I mean, this same thing goes for families, right? If parents are the primary sexuality educators of their children, and if they're not talking about sexuality, then they're giving a message that it's not okay to talk about. And we also know that so very many parents didn't necessarily have a very healthy level of sexuality education themselves. So what we find is oftentimes parents are relieved and happy that there is a place in their faith community that is offering this kind of education.
After the first time that I taught OWL, it was the first time our congregation had offered OWL, right at the beginning of the program. And one of the parents said to me after the program was done, well, thank God you talked to our kids so that we don't have to. And I said, no, that's not how it works. Because we can provide the information and build some of the skills in decision making, but families get to share their own values and their faith values.
Well, why don't we start right there to transition to this next kind of question. Dr. Melanie, you brought it up initially. OWL is grounded in a set of values, right? This might be kind of mythbuster number one about comprehensive sexuality education, particularly when done in faith communities and in communities of what I'd like to call moral courage. Tell us a little bit about OWL's values set.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will first start by saying, that sometimes people assume that because the UUA and the UCC co-publish OWL, that they are necessarily our faith values laden within our whole lives. And they're not. They happen to be, the OWL values are values that the UCC and the UUA support wholeheartely, but they are not necessarily tied to our faith traditions. So we have self-worth, sexual health, responsibility, and justice and inclusivity are the OWL values. And one of the things that I have had people say, well, I'd like to do OWL, but can we do it without all that gay stuff? And no, because an OWL value is justice and inclusivity. And that means everybody is welcome at the table. And that, it's a through line. You cannot just say, oh, there's one workshop on this, and that's the only place that inclusivity is mentioned or justice is mentioned, that it's a through line. And that's true for all of the OWL values, that regardless of what we're talking about, we're not hammering people saying, this is we're talking about the value of self-worth here, but it comes through that you have a right to accurate information. You have a right to claim what you want to happen to your body. You have a right to know about your body. So that's how we weave these values through the curriculum. And again, it's all in developmentally appropriate ways.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think it's important to remember that we have, as part of our sexual health value and our responsibility value, that information about sexuality is helpful. It's not harmful. And we know that it's not only our value in our faith traditions as the UUA and the UCC, but that's also research, right? There's like 3 decades of research that teaching kids and youth about sexuality education and about their bodies and about how reproduction works and about safer sex does not create an earlier sexual debut, and it does not create a situation where, oh my gosh, everybody's going to go out and have sex now that they know about it. So like newsflash, they probably already do know about it, and everybody's got one of these, in their pocket and gets a lot of information. So one of the things that we do is give some context and some processing and some information and some opportunity to discuss and to put our values in with all that information and figure out where that goes. And that's what we know makes a difference. Information dumps don't necessarily do that much good. There's some good that it does, and you can look stuff up on Google and that's fine, or another browser, you can look it up, and that's fine. But having an opportunity to be in conversation with your peers, with trusted and trained adults in your faith community in particular, or anywhere else, gives you the opportunity to really use critical thinking skills. And that's what we know from 3 decades of research. That's what we know makes a difference in decision making and healthy behavior, is those critical thinking skills. So that's one of the things that Our Whole Lives does really well, is provide the processing and the opportunity for discussion about those things and engaging those critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I recently, as you both know, became an OWL trainer. And so I'm excited to be able to bring OWL to congregational and organizational context all over the country as I'm invited to do so. And I really love this framing of OWL, that OWL empowers individuals, empowers families, and empowers congregations to be fully informed and then be able to move out of that place of full information, right? That information is not profane. Actually, information is sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
And lifting it up in the OWL program elevates it to the point of sanctity, in my view. Can you say a little bit more about this notion of parents as primary sexuality educators and how OWL partners with families? Tell us a little bit about what that concretely means. Like, we invite OWL into our community, and what does the parent programming look like for OWL?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And Melanie, you can jump in too. There's several ways that there's several things I think that we mean by that. And then there's several ways that we engage parents. So first of all, when we say that parents are the primary sexuality educators of their children, first and foremost, like I said, that means whatever you're saying matters. And if you're not saying anything, that matters too, because if you're not saying anything and you're not discussing sexuality in your home, you're giving a very loud message very quietly that it's not something we talk about. So that is a big message. So that's one thing. The other thing is that a lot of times parents will say to me, especially of young children, oh yes, we've had the sexual abuse discussions. So then, okay, now you've talked about scary things, but have you talked about the goodness of bodies and the amazing things that bodies can do and how beautiful and sacred and fabulous they are? So that's another thing. Our Whole Lives provides ways to do that and engages parents in lots of different ways. One way is that we have some free resources, and I will type them in the chat so that they can go up on the screen or give them to you in just a moment. But one of them is that we have a Parents and Caregivers as Sexuality Educators curriculum. There's a UCC version and there's a UUA version. So hopefully we can get both of those links in the chat. And that is a curriculum. It's many sessions, and there are some faith pieces woven into it. And it's written as like a small group ministry kind of format. So it's very reflective. So that one is not, it is not determined by what age your children are. You could have parents with many different ages of children in the same group. And it is based on thinking about what are these topics, what are things that I was taught about it, what are messages that are out there in the world, what does my faith say about this, and what do I want my kids to know about it? So it's really a beautiful resource, and it's completely free. It's a free download that's available through both of our websites. And then we also have for young children, for parents of young children, the authors of our newly released Our Whole Lives second edition for kindergarten and first graders, Dorian Solat and Marshall Miller, they recorded a series of videos for us. They're about 5 minutes each, give or take, and it's called Under Your Wing. And they go sort of topic by topic that's in Our Whole Lives for K1, and they say, hey, these are some things that kids this age are often wondering about. These are questions they might ask. Here's some things you could say, and here's some storybooks you might read about it. So it's really a lovely little resource that we have. Again, totally free. If your church or if your organization or your school is running an Our Lives program, the kindergarten and first grade and the 4th through 6th grade material have parent or some parent information, and then they also have a time where parents and kids come together at the beginning to talk about what's going to happen and learn about that. And then both of those ages of programs have something called home links. So after every session, there is a piece of paper that goes home, or a electronic communication that goes home with a PDF that says, this is what we talked about today. Here's some conversations you might want to have at home about this. Here's some things you could do if you want to dive deeper, and here's some resources for you. So there's some really concrete engagement there. And even in the junior and senior high levels of our whole lives, there is a robust parent orientation to have parents engage and be able to see the material. So it's not secretive at all, to dispel that idea that, we're going to go take your kids and teach them stuff that you don't know about. Because that is not what this is about. It's about transparency, and it's about having the parents know and be engaged. And truly, truly, honestly, you as a parent have your kids usually for about 18 years at home. And there's nothing that we are going to be able to do. And even with the biggest, robustest Our Whole Lives program, our junior high program with 25 sessions, you still have your family values, and you still have your voice and your ability and your power and your depth of relationship with your children to be able to put anything in the context of what your family believes and your family values are.
I would say that another way that that Our Whole Lives supports families is through the training that we strongly recommend, that every church, congregation, or other organization, it doesn't, even if you're teaching it in schools, we recommend that people attend the training. And what that does is it not only familiarizes people with the curriculum, but also things like how to answer questions without getting horribly flustered, or how to facilitate the material in a way that separates your own sexual history or values from those that parents have agreed they'd like you to share with their children. And the facilitators build trust with both the parents and guardians and with the children or youth or teens in their programs. And what that means is that they can sometimes have conversations with participants that parents might not have. There is a contract with the families and with the participants in the program that if the facilitators hear anything that is worrisome, like they might be harming themselves or others, then that can be reported out to the families. But otherwise, the facilitators are a trusted adult that people can ask any question they want about their own sexuality or sexuality in general. And parents can trust that the facilitators know how to find resources, sorry about the dog, how to support the values in the curriculum. The facilitators are trained that they're not going to be bringing in outside material that the parents aren't aware of. So if they want to have a pizza party and knock out an owl workshop or two and then have some pizza and show a movie, that's fine. But the parents are going to know what that movie is before it is shared with the youth. So that contract provides a sense of security, that it's teamwork, that the facilitators are teaming with the families for the education of the children, youth, and teens.
It occurred to me that, I was really delighted in the OWL Trainer of Trainers, that program that I participated in order to become an OWL trainer. I was really delighted by the broad and deep backgrounds and experiences of OWL trainers. Could you take a minute to just talk about the training, the training core, or just in broad terms, like who's in front of the room facilitating these trainings? Because I imagine that people want to know, like, who are these people who are going to be training OWL, and what's the nature of the training, so folks can rest assured that the people in the front of the room have been prepared.
Yeah. So there's two terms that we use. We call facilitators are the people who actually implement the curriculum in different settings. So in some, in schools, it would be a teacher, but we see it more as a facilitation role. So those are the people who have ideally attended a training, and we strongly recommend that every program have two trained adults in the room. That's not only to help support each other in the role of facilitation, but it's for safety. We have recommendations that we don't have like one adult in a group of children and whatnot. So those are the facilitators. And then we have a core of trainers like yourself now, and me and Amy, and what are we up to? About 125 now?
100 or so, yeah.
These are people who have attended, as you know, an intense 5-day training. It's such a delight to read the resumes and the cover letters that come to us when we announce that there's going to be a training of trainers. The heart and soul that people bring to this work, they are UUs, they are from the UCC churches, they are from other faith traditions, they are from community settings, but they all come with a wealth of training experience in general. And this time in particular, we had fabulously experienced people who had either run Our Whole Lives programs or were facilitators, or had been trainers of sexuality education in other settings. We had a wealth of racial identities and sexual identities represented across the board. And that's been an intentional effort on the UCC and the UUA's part, that we want our trainer pool to be as diverse as the people who are attending Our Whole Lives. And so we have been very careful in our custom selection of the people that we invite to train. We consistently get people calling us up saying, when's the next TOT? I want to become a trainer. And we're like, oh yeah, we have a really good pool of people right now. We don't have to have TOTs every year because we have so many strong people available across the country and in Canada and in the Philippines. And we have somebody in Sweden also. So we're international too.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, we take it really seriously that if we're going to endorse someone as an Our Whole Lives trainer, we want them to have done their own work, right? Because there is so much unintentional harm that can happen if we're not familiar with our own triggers, our own wounds, and if we can unintentionally cause harm with people that we're working with. And that's true whether we're trainers and we're working with other adults who are going to teach the youth, or whether we're the people who are going to facilitate with the youth. So we take that pretty seriously, and we ask people to go deep, and we don't shy away from tough topics to talk about, and to talk about what is our experience with this, how do things intersect, how do we bring up conversations. We don't always have the answers, but we want people to be able to facilitate conversations around tough topics that may come up, and to not be hesitant to reach out for help. We have a listserv for facilitators and for trainers where people can ask and say, like, this has come up. I'm wondering what you do about this. Like, does anybody have any suggestions? And we treat that as sacred work, because really we want to not harm anyone. We really do. So we want to be able to be a beloved community together, and to be able to support each other and call each other in when we hear something that we think is, maybe that's not a good idea for you to do that. Let's talk about why and what another thing you can do is. So those are some things we take really seriously. The people who are our trainers, our approved trainers who do the trainings for other facilitators, have been through, as Naomi said, a pretty intense time. We spent 5 or 6 days together and did some deep and intense work around some topics that, like race and sexuality, and how do those things intersect. about abuse and assault, about how to deal with power dynamics in churches, about all different kinds of how do you deal with really challenging behaviors with people. So so all those kinds of things we do, and we have some teach back time, and we tell people like this is evaluative. Just because you've come to the training of trainers, and we also say when you come to a facilitator training, it's not a guarantee that we're going to say good to go. It's a time of evaluation that you're evaluating yourself, saying is this the right thing for me right now to be doing? Is there some other work I maybe need? Did this touch something so tender in me that maybe there's a little bit more healing that needs to happen before I take on trying to facilitate with other people? Or am I somebody who has done enough of that work that I feel like, okay, I can do this. Like I might feel that tension when this topic comes up, but I've got some ways to do self-care that I've practiced, and I'm pretty good at that. So we do take it pretty seriously.
One of the things that that trainers learn when they're becoming, in a training of trainers is how to model how we hope people will facilitate, so that when people attend a facilitator training, they're watching the trainers in action, and they're learning by saying, oh, that's how I could handle that discussion, or, oh, okay, that's how they were able to deflect a really personal question. Because we don't want facilitators talking about their personal sexual lives or behaviors, or even whether they watch porn or whatever. That's not part of our whole lives, because our whole lives is about the participants and their questions and not even their experiences, because we don't encourage self-disclosure in our whole lives. But we want to make sure that the focus is always on the participants and their learning, as opposed to the facilitators' perhaps tendency to overshare or whatever. So the trainings really, really focus on the importance of boundaries, maintaining not professionalism, but sort of a warmth, guiding presence that isn't too familiar, because we don't want to intrude on that trusting adult relationship with the participants in the program.
And I think I want to say something about that too, Melanie. Thanks for saying that so much about the boundaries. I think it's so important, especially in faith communities, especially with youth work, because I think that there has been a history, especially in some progressive spaces, of just trying to be the kids' friends, or whatever with youth work, and really that's not what it's about. It's about the kids, and it's about the youth. So we want to make sure that there are people doing that work that understand about boundaries, and that understand about having fun and creating a warm environment without having to tell all of my personal information to you. That is not necessary in order to create a relationship.
Go ahead, Dr. Melanie. I see you about to say something.
Well, it was just, my little trigger was in faith communities, and I was gonna digress a minute and say that one of the things that both Amy and I do is preach about sexuality within our faith traditions, and that's important. One of the things that we add in training facilitators is how to implement the program. We don't just say, oh, you're good to go, use it. But it's like, okay, so here are the different ways you can use it. You can go do workshops back to back for 7th to 9th graders, or you can, we talk about how not to use it, how not to just change it willy-nilly, because then it's no longer our whole lives. We talk about working with parents to create scheduling that works, right? But none of that is helpful if the church or the congregation, regardless of denomination, doesn't fully commit to the Our Whole Lives program. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a clergy person, or if you're lay led, if you don't have your lay leaders fully backing your program, then the facilitators just are kind of floundering around without any support. They often won't have financial support to attend trainings or buy updated materials. So we kind of want people to think of our whole lives as a holistic effort within a church or congregation, that everybody's on board. For that reason, when we recommend that when people host parent orientations, that we recommend that the minister or the Christian educator or director of religious education in UU settings, that they're there to physically show support for the facilitators and for the Our Whole Lives program. We love it when ministers attend Our Whole Lives facilitator trainings, even if they never plan to facilitate Our Whole Lives. The fact that they have attended any level of OWL training gives them language that they can use when they write sermons about sexuality or about justice and inclusivity, or if they're having conversations in the community about reproductive choice. Having that experience of attending a training strengthens their confidence level, gives them perhaps some new language that they can use, helps them feel that they're not alone in this effort. So those are some of the when we talk about it being a holistic program, it's not just comprehensive in the content, but we want it to be comprehensive within the church or congregation as well.
I love this. I love that OWL can be the invitation that a congregation needs to open up in all areas around sexuality, whether that's in the preaching and what happens during the worship service, whether that's how they approach pastoral care and congregational care, and how they approach religious education or sacred education to fully fund and invest in all the ways in OWL. I love that about OWL, and that transitions me to, we're going to go over, I see the questions have been rolling in, so why don't we take some of them.
Okay,
somebody is asking about how organizations, congregations pay for this, how they pay to have people trained to be facilitators, and all of that. So can you say some general things about how congregations have approached making this financial investment?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a few things to say about that. So first of all, we being the UCC and the UUA have some online trainings available now. That's new since, we have all traveled through this worldwide systemic lockdown situation in 2020. So we came up with an online version of an Our Whole Lives training. So those are provided, and those are the ones that our national settings host. And by our national settings, I mean mostly it's on the UUA platform, so they have the heavy lift there. But those are available to take at home on Zoom within a 3-week period, and that is available to anyone. You don't have to be UCC or UUA to take that. There's a limited number of spaces, but all the information about registering and when those windows for registration are open are on our training websites, which we'll get into the chat real soon. But also the other trainings, the in-person trainings, are largely hosted by individual congregations or regional bodies in our faith traditions. So it might be a UUA region or a UCC conference or something like that would host those. Those are generally like the just trying to break even situation. So the cost of those varies from place to place in the country, and whether housing is included or only meals or that kind of thing. Sometimes people will choose to host in their organization or their congregation because that's a way that they can do a budget and figure out how much to charge people, and they make their money back, and then it's an even wash. Other times people will say, we don't have the capacity to do that, so we're just going to send people. Some churches have a budget for that. Some organizations have a budget for that. Others fundraise, or they go to their conference or their region, or they ask for help in other ways to do that. So there's lots of ways to get that together. Once you have a couple of people trained and you purchase the curriculum, you're good to go. So it's not like it's an ongoing investment all the time. except that it's good to continue to get a couple more folks trained every once in a while, so you're not relying just on 2 people. But there's not like an ongoing cost to continue to run it. There aren't like student workbooks you have to buy every time or anything like that.
There are some recommended books that for the elementary classes that families can read together at home with their children. And those are sold through the UCC and the UUA. They're books that are available in general bookstores as well. But as Amy said, you don't need, there isn't a textbook that OWL participants need. One of the things that I try to do is I try to encourage when we talk, and I talked about OWL being a holistic, whole church, whole congregational effort, is that I truly believe that OWL should be in the budget. It should have its own budget line so that the facilitators or the program coordinator are not holding out their hands every year to say, please, can I have $350 to send somebody to a training? If it's in the line item, if it's a steady budget item, then that shows commitment on the organization's part to support the program.
There's another question about trainings that has come through the chat. Are OWL trainings approved for ASECT? AASECT?
So
hours.
Yeah. So I'm a member I'm actually supervise people who are looking for CSE credits. So the answer there is that ASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, to be a certified sexuality educator, you have to have, coursework. The way ASECT counts it is that if a program is an ASECT endorsed program, you get 1 CE per hour. OWL is not ASECT endorsed because we can't track all the types of certifications that people want. So what we do is we will provide an email saying, this is how many contact hours you had. What ASECT does is, let's say that a training is 22 contact hours, ASECT will count half of those toward certification requirements. But we'll do the same thing for people who are looking for teaching, continuing education for teaching or social work. We will confirm the number of hours of training they had, and then it's up to them to work out the details with that organization.
We do have one trainer who is a assistant professor at a university and is working on having that university be able to provide continuing ed hours for educators and some other folks. So stay tuned. There's always like exciting upcoming things in the world of our whole lives. Just always. It's never boring. We love our jobs.
There are lots of questions about the training, so I'm going to get these all in under this batch. There's a question about the extent to which OWL training or OWL curriculum is evidence-based or evidence-informed. And you touched a little bit on it earlier when you talked about research as it relates to adolescent medicine, but could you just repeat that again? To what extent is OWL curriculum evidence-based? It
is definitely evidence-informed, and Melanie wrote a white paper about that. And we are working on some opportunities to have our own more robust research about it. But I will say that there are several states that do have it on their approved curriculum list for sexuality education. I know Washington State does. I think that Oregon. I think there's. I don't want to say ones that I don't know for sure, but there are several states that have where it has gone through a rigorous enough review to be on their in their approved curriculum list. So that's one thing. And I know in Washington State, it's required that the curricula be comprehensive and inclusive and medically accurate. So those are some things to know about it. Melanie, you want to add something?
Yeah, one of the things that I would add is that we are committed to always having our material as we go through and we revise things or create new things. We have what we call accountability readers. And they are people who hold varied identities, professional identities, sexual identities, gender identities. So disability, lenses. So we ask them, we pay them to actually read this material to see whether it works for them, and particularly, reading it for, does this work for the age group? Does this work for people who have lots of different kinds of disabilities, or are we missing something? And that's one of the ways that we keep ourselves in check. I mean, Amy and I have our own lenses, and the authors that we engage have their own lenses. And by engaging a broader spectrum of readers to look at this and give us really honest feedback about, yeah, this missed the mark, or yeah, this was really good, maybe tweak it just a little bit. So that's another way that we're being accountable to the people who use Our Whole Lives.
Yeah, and we're also working on having academic reviews of the material too before it's published. So that's going on. In terms of the question that's under the bar right now, the saying about, is the TOT evidence-based or evidence-informed? So the TOT is based on the curriculum, the training of trainers, and our facilitator trainings are based on that. And in addition, all of those are created and written by professional sexuality educators who are upholding the highest standards that we know about with the National Sex Ed Standards and SIECUS guidelines. I will just throw that in there. So those are things that we use to create those, and we review them periodically and say, is there a better way for adults to have this information? Is there a better way, a more effective way that we can use and deploy this information to people so that they can be better trainers?
There are some really specific and contextual questions around the curriculum and around training. So what I want you to do while I ask this next question is, Amy and Melanie, put in the chat your contact information or where people can go to ask those really, really specific and contextual questions. In case we run out of time, I just want to be mindful of time, and I want everybody's question to get to you. There's a question around how to approach bringing OWL to leaders of a particular faith community, like Catholic communities. So can you talk about whether or not that's been done, and specifically Catholic communities? And then there's a broader question about leaders in faith-based communities who sort of micromanage or gatekeep these specific kinds of conversations and sort of restrict these kinds of knowledge sharing opportunities in their faith-based spaces. In other words, how do we get out in faith communities that are not ready to go right now, who might need a little help?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Over the years, and Amy has her own list of contacts as well, but I know I've been contacted by folks who are ELCA, Quaker, from Reform and conservative Jewish traditions, Methodists, Episcopalians, did I say Quakers? A whole bunch of them. So we do not gatekeep who uses Our Whole Lives, other than to make it clear that they need to use OWL as it's written, with the OWL values. And like I gave that example earlier, you cannot take out the LGBT stuff because it's part of the justice and inclusivity, right? So we welcome everybody to use it if it is appropriate for their values as well. That's why we don't go to other cultures and countries saying, here, we've got this thing, you should use it. If people approach us, then we're happy to talk to them about whether it's a good fit. So I don't see it as my job to try to talk Catholics into using Our Whole Lives. But if there were a parish that wanted to use it, by all means, I would work with them and try to help them make it work for their setting.
I will say that I know of 2 Catholic organizations that are actually using Our Whole Lives. One is a girls' school, a Catholic girls' school outside of Seattle, Washington. Albeit it's a progressive Catholic girls' school, but they are using Our Whole Lives for 5th through 12th grade. And they have training for their staff every year. And I've continued to do some parent education for them. And by and large, they are all on board with it. And it's a beautiful thing. It fits with their values of empowering their young people. And they have even incorporated some expansive conversations about what does it mean to be a girls' school, who can come. So that's just a lovely, lovely example. And I also know that a couple of our trainers did some trainings in Idaho with a Catholic hospital organization several years ago who wanted to bring some educational opportunities to their communities. So, and we have a Mennonite group in the Midwest that is going to be doing some training for their folks this summer. So as Melanie said, we're not gatekeeping who can use it. I also want to say, though, that sometimes, like just starting out within our Whole Lives program, there needs to be some pre-work, right? Yes. There needs to be some pre-work and there needs to be conversations. So I'm at a conference right now, and we did a workshop today, some of my colleagues and I, about using some tools from our Whole Lives. We used what we call the UCC principles guiding our commitment to sexuality education. And we used something called the circles of sexuality around our Whole Lives. And we talked about how does that theology push back against some of the sort of prevailing Christian narratives in our country today. And so that was very well received. And it's a way to just kind of like open people's minds. And I've seen that over and over again. That and I will tell you, I have been to Tanzania with an Anglican priest and an imam, a beautiful imam who does a ton of LGBTQ affirming work in the global South. And I have walked into rooms where there are clergy in their collars and their suits sitting there like this, like, what are you going to tell me? And we provide this information. We use the tools of our Whole Lives. We have the discussion. We have the conversation. We have a priest deconstructing and reconstructing scripture, and we have an imam deconstructing and reconstructing the imam around gender-based violence and gender itself and all same-sex relationships. And it's an amazing thing that at the end there is joy and sacred, holy beauty in the room. It's an incredible transition to watch.
And that's an example of the UCC being invited into that work, as opposed to either of us going to Tanzania and saying, here's the thing that you need to use.
Yeah.
One of the things that I guess we haven't really touched on, so Our Whole Lives has a companion volume or has companion material called Sexuality and Our Faith. And we're changing the format. To date, it has been 2 separate books. So you buy the OWL book, and then if you're a UCC or UU setting, you also buy the Sexuality and Our Faith. And we are currently making it easier for people to integrate the faith material. There's still going to be the secular version, but there will be an OWL UU version and an OWL UCC version as well. And the value of that is that it allows us to put the secular content into the context of each of our faith values. And so, Amy was giving an example earlier that the UCC side has scripture and readings, and the UUA has candle lightings. And I think that it's just important for people to know that if you're from another faith tradition and you want to use Our Whole Lives, by all means, we can offer you some guidance in creating your own faith edition that works for your tradition, regardless of what your faith tradition is. Because it's just as important, I suspect, for people who are Jewish to want to put sexuality education in the context of their faith as it is for us to put it in ours. So we're happy to help people create. We don't publish them, but we're happy to guide people in the creation of their own supplementary material for their faith tradition.
So I hope what people are walking away with from this hour-long, meaty conversation, robust conversation, is number one, that the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association are available to accompany you through this OWL journey, right? This is not a plug and play just purchase the curriculum online and you're off to the races. We want to accompany you as you think through, how do we get our community ready for OWL, right? Then once OWL is going, if we've got questions, we know we can always refer back to these two anchoring denominational groups, right? And so know that you've got a resource to help think through the possibilities for your congregational community. And then two, we got trainings available for people who want to facilitate OWL online and in person. So if you go to the links, the UUA has a calendar, the UCC has a calendar, you can find out what's going on in your neck of the woods or online and get your people signed up. So we've got at least two points of access, points of entry into the training world for OWL. And then you've got a partner in SIECUS, right? So now you're fired up about comprehensive sexuality education. You see in real time on the ground that comprehensive sexuality education raises the standard, raises the bar for everybody in a congregational community to be in their bodies, to think of sexuality, not just in terms of what we should be afraid of, and I put afraid of in quotes, but also how we should see sexuality as a gift, how we should see pleasure as a gift. SIECUS is the advocacy organization that is ready to prepare you to do the work to advocate for policy change as it relates to comprehensive sexuality education. Once you experience OWL, there's no going back, right? You are an OWL, what we like to say is OWL evangelist, right? You're an OWL evangelist. And so it's important to have voices, particularly of people of faith, in SIECUS's messaging and narration of this issue, right? And so be sure to see how you can support the Real Education and Access for Healthy Youth Act, contacting your member of Congress. SIECUS can help you do that. So we've got what I'm going to call a holy trinity of organizations here.
I love that. I love that.
you know, I'm gonna close this thing. I'm a preacher first, and so I'm gonna close this thing up. We got the holy trinity of organizations: SIECUS, the United Church of Christ, and the Unitarian Universalist Association, to help support this movement for comprehensive sexuality education. It's possible that our faith communities can lead the way. That's my dream. That our faith communities can lead the way in providing space for young people and older people, everybody, all bodies, right, to be well informed about sexuality, right? I want to give you a last word because I think we're closing out soon. So I'm trying to check all of the chats. I want to give you a chance to answer this question. If you could mobilize people of faith to do one thing, one faithful next step to take towards sexuality liberation, what would you want them to do?
I would encourage people to let their faithful voices be heard, because we're hearing so much from a particular side of faith that is anti-sex, anti-reproductive justice, anti-rights for trans folks. You know, if people of faith hold different values that, you know, I don't even want to label them as necessarily progressive, but if people of faith who support healthy sexuality, healthy relationships, acceptance of people, however they show up in the world as sexual beings, don't be afraid to let your voice be heard, to advocate for this.
I'm going to say that my last word is lead with love. Lead with love and be courageous. And if for some reason you don't believe that sexuality is holy and sacred and good, then think about why and do some work to turn that around, because God is good and God loves you and God loves your body, and it was created as good and very good, it says in our scripture. So go to that and love yourselves and lead with love. Let that love flow through you so that you can be courageous and stand up for what you know is right.
I want to say thank you to Reverend Amy Johnson and Dr. Melanie Davis for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. I, again, am Reverend Naomi, a proud member of the SIECUS Board of Directors. I want to thank SIECUS for offering this platform during Sex Ed for All Month so we could talk about faith-rooted sexuality education. If you've got any questions, Reverend Amy and Dr. Melanie have put their email addresses in the chat. You can find them online, even if you miss their email addresses. Go to the UUA website, go to the UCC website, and search for OWL, and you'll be able to find them there. We hope that this has been an informative time, and we hope that you follow up. We hope that you live into that courage and live into that love and find out how you can get out in your congregational or organizational community. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.